And then you have to have this little footnote, but we need as many Albertans as possible to get vaccinated. I will when it's my turn, and I hope others will too. In the fucking small print at the bottom. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Premier? Like, but we will not make any vaccine mandatory. We got you. We got you, but please, everyone do it. Please, if you don't do it, we could all keep getting sick, and we need you to all do it. So please do it. We don't have a lot of healthcare workers. We don't have a lot of people in the hospital anymore. So please help us out. But yes, I'm going to talk a little bit about this. We don't talk a lot about Alberta. Some people here might know that Alberta is considered the Texas of Canada. It's been called a lot of pejoratives. It's been called a lot of negative things. But right now, Alberta is kind of a neat experiment. In the eyes of the world, I should say. Alberta, for a long time, you may know it as the oil-producing capital of Canada. It's where the tar sands are. Most of them are located up here north near Fort McMurray. Fort McMurray probably would not have been on Google Maps quite so prominently along with other major parts like the city of Edmonton or the city of Calgary in Alberta. These are the two major cities you might know of. They both have professional NHL teams. That could be the other reason why you know about them. But Alberta, like most places, it gets a shitty rap, okay? Like Texas gets an overwhelmingly shitty rap when there's a lot of amazing, wonderful people that come out of Texas. There's a lot of amazing, wonderful people that come out of Alberta as well. I'm not going to shit on the people of Alberta. I will shit on the government of Alberta, which is typically quite conservative. It oscillates between a conservative. Very recently, it went to the NDP, which was a huge shock to everyone. But the NDP of Alberta, surprise, surprise, were still kind of conservative. At either rate, they are the oil-producing capital of Canada and one of the largest oil producers of all of North America right now. The tar sands of Alberta are one of the most polluting, horrifying, worst ways to extract oil in human history. It requires an inordinate amount of water and chemicals to extract. It comes out in the form of bitumen, which means that we cannot utilize it until we process it somewhere else. Typically, we have to process it in other plants, which is why things like giant pipelines are constantly being built out of Alberta to ship that bitumen to other places where it can be refined and processed. It's disgusting. It's gross. It's a terrible way to extract energy from the earth in order to utilize it. And it's at a time when, again, the value of bitumen and oil is at an all-time low. At a certain point during the pandemic, it actually went to negative amounts in terms of oil barrels, which I didn't know could happen. I didn't know a barrel of oil could dip below $0 to -$. At which point, how does that work? Do they pay you? Is it like we just gift you oil because you have to take it off our hands? I'm being facetious, but you understand. So anyways, Alberta gets a lot of shit. The pandemic happens. I've explained before on this stream that, the pandemic occurring, it's basically shown everyone around the world what the class stratifications are under capitalism. If you happen to be indigenous, if you happen to be black, if you happen to be old, if you happen to be most especially poor, then you are more likely to die from COVID-19. It's because you, A, will probably have pre-existing conditions, B, cannot get the healthcare you need, you cannot not afford to see a doctor or even get tested, or C, you're a frontline worker, and you're probably working in an environment where you were going to get heavily exposed to COVID-19, such as working in factories, working in food processing plants, or having to take public transportation every single day and getting squished in with a whole bunch of coworkers. So yeah, it's unfortunate. At a time now when COVID-19 is ravaging the entire world, Alberta has become, to the shock of some perhaps, one of the worst parts in Canada for COVID-19. Now, there's other parts that are worse, specifically Manitoba, and that again has a lot to do with poverty and unfortunately the way the Indigenous people have been treated in Canada, systemic poverty, historic poverty. But Alberta's unique because Jason Kenney, the Premier of Alberta, he had a plan, and his plan was personal responsibility. And you may have heard this. It's for you Europeans. It was the Swedish strategy, the one that a lot of Americans like to tout. Your conservative Americans, they're usually really excited about this. Like, oh yes, personal responsibility, libertarianism. We're all for that. Yes, please. That's the way this should be handled, right? Everyone according to their abilities and based on how much their bank accounts have. That's basically it. So the idea was personal responsibility, as well as some more shocking things. So I'm going to go through these in history. Alberta Health Services cut 11,000 jobs. This is the Alberta public healthcare system. They cut 11,000 workers' jobs, just sliced, gone, at a time when we were in the middle of a pandemic to, yes, save money. Now, there's a lot of ways you can save money. You might be able to lower the amount of corporate welfare that you're giving, the amount of subsidies that you're giving to the oil industry, of which Alberta gives a fuck ton. But no, the other way is, of course, to cut social programs, to cut programs that directly help people. And this is something, by the way, is a model that has been extrapolated in other parts of the world, but no one did it like Alberta. Not even you Yanks. Not even the Yanks did this, all right? Not even America went this far as to cut such an enormous block of the public sector, of the health sector. What could go wrong, you say? What could possibly go wrong? Because at the time, I was like, that seems a little strange. The Alberta government plans to cut the equivalent of 9,700 full-time health service jobs in an effort to save $600 million annually. $600 million. 4,000 housekeeping jobs, 3,000 food service jobs, 2,000 laboratory jobs, 400 laundry jobs, and at least 100 management jobs are all expected to be axed in the proposed cuts. 68%, like outrageous, swift and fierce. Of course, there was pushback against this, as there should be. Unions were rallying against it, healthcare cuts and privatization. People were trying their best.
Good afternoon. Members of several unions are rallying across the province today, saying they're taking a stand against job cuts and possible privatization of healthcare.
It's part of the Alberta Federation of Labour's latest campaign. Around 100 people from about a dozen unions gathered this morning in front of the Foothills Hospital. They say they're mad at the province's plan to cut or contract out 11,000 jobs in the health sector. The province says it'll save $600 million a year, but unions disagree. They say workers feel disrespected in the middle of this pandemic, as many are looking for.
So yeah, it'll save $600 million in the short term. In the short term, what exactly are the long-term ramifications of doing this? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when 10,000 healthcare workers in the middle of a pandemic are no longer working on healthcare? What could that possibly do to a province of this size? On top of that, they had a get back to school program similar to the United States. Alberta schools advising thousands of students to isolate based on informal COVID notices. About a third of the cases in Edmonton public schools are unconfirmed by health professionals. The same shit you were hearing about in America. Yeah, they were doing it. They were getting the kids back into the schools because, of course, we have to get people back to work, of course. The stocks must go up. In Canada, it's called the TSX. The Alberta government leaving hundreds of millions of dollars for workers unclaimed, and labor advocates are saying. New data obtained by the federal NDP showed the Alberta government is national outlier for leaving federal pandemic funds for frontline workers unclaimed. The information released by the Alberta Federation of Labour on Friday shows that the provincial government has left $300 million on the table that could be used to pay top-up wages to healthcare workers, correctional officers, first responders, and other essential workers. Without providing specifics, a government spokesman says some of the extra money will be going to workers within weeks, which would be amazing. But the stalemate means that Alberta stretches into its 7th month. Workers in Ontario, BC, Manitoba, Maritimes have already received danger pay for showing up to work in person. To know that those workers are not getting the benefits the other workers across the country are getting makes me deeply, deeply disappointed. And it should. It absolutely should. It's just middle fingers all around, it seems, one after the other. Like, how many of these things can happen? Jason Kenney's faith in personal responsibility is no match for Alberta's COVID-19 surge. Surge, you say? Well, surprise, surprise, Alberta suddenly is having a monstrous surge in COVID-19. Jason Kenney may be a practicing Catholic, but over the last few months, he has made it clear that he worships more enthusiastically at the altar of personal responsibility. And while the recent spike in COVID-19 cases in Alberta has alarmed doctors across the province, who recommended a series of decisive actions aimed at slowing the spread, during a November 12th press conference in which the government announced a series of new and limited restrictions, Kenney reiterated the belief that Albertans could be trusted to do the right thing. Evidence to the contrary notwithstanding. We are putting our faith in the good judgment of Albertans, the Premier said, which is why these measures are voluntary right now. Albertans quickly proved that his faith was misplaced, as Kenney was forced to announce additional restrictions in less than 2 weeks after that. But even then, Kenney made it clear that it's just a watch me moment and wasn't in the offing. Even something like a mandatory mask mandate, which is now in place every other province in Canada, was apparently too much to ask, so he wouldn't even do the mandatory masks. If I think we continue to encourage mask wearing in crowded areas where people cannot physically distance, in workplaces where it makes sense, particularly in these areas of high transmission, but that we not create a condition where there's a backlash. What's the backlash? The backlash against people dying? Oh, the backlash from all the right-wing weirdos, because there is a lot of right-wing weirdos in Canada. There's QAnoners, there's right-wing conspiracy people, there's people who are saying, let us go back to work, masks are a tool of the devil, and all this kind of stuff. It controls our penises. According to a recent poll, 59% of Albertans were either very or somewhat dissatisfied with the government's response, And no wonder. At a time where the situation clearly calls for a show of political resolve, Albertans are getting done a tedious moralizing of a frustrated but ineffectual parent, instead imposing measures that might actually reduce the spread of the virus, from the suspension of indoor dining, bars, and religious service to more effective work-from-home directives. It gets even weirder, by the way. Oh, there he is. Jason Kenney. I gotta show you this ad he actually spent time making. Check this one out. No vaccines will be mandatory in Alberta, but we need as many Albertans as possible to get vaccinated. I know I will choose to be vaccinated, and I hope others will too. Now, I'm fine with you not making vaccines mandatory. Okay, that's gonna suddenly get a whole bunch of people scared and spooked out that like, oh, okay, the government is forcing us to do things. I'm okay with that. Why are you spending taxpayer money on ads to flaunt this? This is the part where I'm like, what the fuck are you doing? You cut $600 million from the budget by getting rid of healthcare workers during a pandemic, and at the same time, you're spending money on advertisement to boast that you will not be making vaccines mandatory. And then you have to have this little footnote, but we need as many Albertans as possible to get vaccinated. I will when it's my turn, and I hope others will too. In the fucking small print at the bottom. Like, what the fuck are you doing, Premier? Like, but we will not make any vaccine mandatory. We got you. We got you. But please, everyone do it. Please, if you don't do it, we could all keep getting sick, and we need you to all do it. So please do it. We don't have a lot of healthcare workers. We don't have a lot of people in the hospital anymore. So please help us out. Help us. And here's the fucking chaser for everybody. Just recently, Alberta asked the federal government, the Red Cross, for field hospitals as COVID-19 has run out of control in the province. So that's the fucking kicker to this entire story, from the start to the finish, all right? When you let neoliberal capitalism run amok, when you let the profit motive dictate your decision-making as a province or as a state or as a country, here's what fucking happens, all right? Like, you know that expression, play stupid games, win stupid prizes? No shit. If you cut all of your healthcare workers, if you shave $600 million worth of public healthcare workers, if you keep giving all this money to oil and gas corporations and subsidize their behavior, while at the same time tell everyone that it's about personal responsibility, and then flaunt on top of that vaccines, we're not going to force you to take them. Don't worry, we got you and your personal freedoms. You got those. Don't have to wear masks in spaces. We got that too. Totally fine. Everything's going to be great. And then what the fuck happens? This, and the saddest thing about all this is that it's again going to be poor people, black people, indigenous people, old people who are going to die, because these fucked up politicians and corporations are doing and saying exactly what they want. That's the kicker in this whole thing. Province struggling with soaring COVID-19 cases. Hospitals are overwhelmed. As COVID-19 cases soar in Alberta and the hospital capacity is stretched, the province has reached out to federal government and the Canadian Red Cross for help. A federal source with direct knowledge of the situation says Alberta has asked the federal government and the Red Cross to supply field hospitals to help offset the strain COVID-19 is having on the healthcare system, because of fucking course. This is what happens when you just gut and erode the public healthcare system, when there's nothing left for the people. Yeah, when these things suddenly balloon out of control, you are going to need help. You're going to need to ask for help. And yeah, the source said Alberta would be likely to receive at least 4 field hospitals, 2 from the Red Cross, another 2 from the federal government. The source, speaking out on the condition of confidentiality, said there was no request for human resources to staff the hospitals and no request to support from the military yet. The source said formal requests have not been sent by the province. It's responsible planning. Alberta Premier Jason Kenney dismissed the suggestion that the requests were indicative of a failure by the province to manage the pandemic effectively. How can you say this? How can you say that with a straight face? Like, look at the face. Look at this face. He's even had to apply a little bit of rouge, because they knew, if you're going out on camera, sir, if you're going to tell these lies, we need you to wear a little bit of rouge. All right. I mean, it's better than pinching. Okay. That's all I'll say. No, I think a sign of responsibility planning on our part of a potential extreme scenario. With around 8,500 beds and 100 hospitals, Kenney said the province can likely dedicate 2,200 to 2,300 of those to COVID-19 patients. The reality is we have to continue to create capacity, as we expect. Quite bluntly, the hospitalization numbers will go up given the new cases that last in a few weeks. But that demonstrates that we're not near anywhere to the point of having to call on this kind of overflow capacity. So guess what, everyone? Guess what? If you're an American and you're terribly afraid, and you have a right to be, every right to be, because after all, things are much worse there. They are much worse. Or if you're European and you're holding your nose at certain countries, but you think Canada is above the fray, and you're like, well, no, Canada is a wonderful model for the world. I'm sorry to say that in the province of Alberta, this is the example of what happens when you choose profits over people. I mean, I know that's a slogan, and we say it all the time, profits over people, but that's entirely what happened here. And this is such a textbook case of what can go wrong. This is such a textbook case of what happens when this is the most important thing. When deep down, we don't care about the survival of fellow human beings. The same thing applies to global warming. And of course, that comes from a place like Alberta, a place that comes from a place in which, yes, they're heating up at twice the rate as the rest of North America for good reason. Like, it's because at the end of the day, it is more important to turn a profit for these corporations for the betterment of the shareholders and for everyone who gets the trickle down benefits from that. And it's not trickle down in that the citizens get it. It's trickle down in that motherfuckers like this get it. And that motherfuckers like members of the media get it. All right. If you're part of the conservative media in Canada, I'm sure you're getting great old little checks to keep talking about how global warming, we don't really know all the numbers. All the scientific consensus hasn't really told us everything about that. It's confusing. In America, you get things like the Koch brothers who fund a whole bunch of different programs, specials, television shows, YouTube series, what have you, for the simple fact of, yes, as long as we keep this messaging, the billionaires will pay the millionaires to tell all the rest of the people that it's not actually the ones you should be mad at, it's the globalists. You got to look towards the globalists. They're the ones fucking you all over. That's what's happening. Personal responsibility, right? How many of you here have cleaned up your room, by the way? Have anyone watching this, have you cleaned up your room?
Clean up your room.
No. What's wrong with you? Clean up your rooms. All of you. All right, you know what? One of the failings, I think, not of myself, but of just people on the left in general, is that we allow the Jordan Petersons of the world to dictate these spaces. So let me be the first to say, clean up your rooms, everyone. You'll feel better about yourselves. It's going to be a wonderful thing. It's something you can do, and it costs you nothing. All of you, clean up your rooms. I'm not saying this because you have to do it in order to be better human beings. I'm saying this because it's going to help you. It's going to help you focus, all right? It's going to remove a very small percentage of perhaps your ennui or depression, because you can go by and you can be like, well, at least the room is clean. We got that much. So clean up your rooms. Do it just for your own cleanliness, for your peace of mind. And then go exercise. Do it in any form. It doesn't have to be like lifting weights. It doesn't have to be like, doing the things they want you to do. Go dance. Go dance somewhere. Play your favorite kind of music. If it's metal, if it's bluegrass, doesn't matter. And then go dance, because exercise is amazing for you. It is. We're supposed to exercise like 30 minutes a day, and that'll help get the blood flowing. It also helps towards curing depression. And again, these are all free. These are free things you can do right now. Or go have sex. And if you don't have a partner to have sex with yourself. You can do all these things. It'll make you feel great. And on top of which, you'll expend some energy. You'll have clarity of mind. I mean, these are all the things that Jordan Peterson is telling people, and people who are like lost and looking for guidance are like, oh, maybe he's right, and all this other stuff he's saying about Jung. I mean, Carl Jung it's very important. We have to understand these things. These are good things.
Hey, we want to mutual aid you to get some eyeballs on your work. So if you have a leftist YouTube channel or Twitch stream or something you want us to advertise, just send us a 20 to 30 second ad using the forums at weareserfs.com. We'll do our best to help you out. And please submit once per channel.
To our gods, Amrad, and Xander Forbes, we shall build temples in your honor. To our monarch, Tom Spiker, we live to do your bidding. To our lords, Jeffrey Lamb, Trevor R., Stephen, Nine Tails Cosmic Fox, Han Josephine, Poppy Nelson, Ryan Lubin, Jimothy K. Meeble Beeps Jr., we bow meekly for your pleasure. And to our Knights of the Round Table, Josh Mickelson, Dylan Veit, Zach Christensen, Todd Buckingham, Todd Lajeunesse, Political Puppy, Ali Menthal, Jimmy Big Nuts, Andreas Chitoro, Good Poon Hates Cops, That's Solid Poon Then, Dr. Zayas, Joppy, Violent Orchard, Sophie Baby, Jack Darko, Thomas Barrington, J. Fraser Cartwright, Goofalankius, Melissa Murphy, Nicholas Marks, Alexander Thaler, Ramon Acosta, and Ali Retta Jaffer. We salute you. Love you all. Peace.